Welcome to Pennsylvania in Focus. I'm Aliana Kernodle, and today we're talking about the idea of taxing billionaires in Pennsylvania. Joining me to tell us more about this is the Center Square's Pennsylvania reporter, Christina Langell. Christina, a group of lawmakers from both chambers in Pennsylvania came together to talk about the idea of having billionaires pay more taxes to help fund the state. Can you tell us a little bit about what arguments they were making, what they were saying?
So the lawmakers are really pointing out that there are a lot of billionaires, both individuals and, large corporations who make quite a bit of money in Pennsylvania, but because of different tax loopholes, they don't necessarily pay into the state. In fact, I think something like around 70%, one of the senators quoted, of corporations making money in Pennsylvania don't pay any tax in Pennsylvania. So that's a pretty large figure. They're saying, hey, let's just collect taxes from these people. And this, big revenue issue that we seem to have would perhaps be less.
And who were some of the people who were a part of this group?
So in addition to some of the state senators, they were all, Democrats from the Senate and the House. Some of the individuals who came to support the legislators were from the SEIU, which is, a major union in the state. And then we also had a group called Payback, which is the Pennsylvanians for Accountability for Yass, Billionaires, and Corporations. So Jeff Yass is the state's richest man. He has somewhere around 70 or 65, 67, 60, somewhere in there in the $60 billion range. I'm sure it varies day to day since so much of that kind of thing is in stock, but 60 billion plus. He is very widely discussed in Pennsylvania politics because he uses that money to really try to influence the political sphere. He was recently called out for basically paying for mailers that were said to be inaccurate regarding the judicial retention race at the Supreme Court that will be voted on next week. He's as most states do have, we have our people who are very invested, and he happens to spend a lot of money towards conservative political agendas.
And some of these lawmakers have specific bills that they are putting forward. What are some of those proposals?
Yeah, I think the one that's probably most relevant to that group, which they call it Payback, so that's what the acronym is for. But that group was advocating for taxing passive income more. So basically, when you're making money off of stocks and things that don't qualify as earned income, they're not getting taxed at the same rate. So they're encouraging for a new tax on that. Rep. Rick Krajewski, he floated a co-sponsorship memo that would address this, although the details of the bill aren't there yet. So I'm not sure exactly how they would go about it, what rate they would try to put in there. The other two bills have been around longer. One would charge a gross receipts tax for digital advertising. So right now you could be a company, say in California, and you're advertising sales in Pennsylvania, and you're, maybe distributing stuff from Delaware. So you're making a sale in Pennsylvania, you're making money off of advertisements that you have put on people's Facebook or wherever digital advertising is. But Pennsylvania doesn't get any of that revenue. So this would include a 5% tax on gross receipts for basically selling things to Pennsylvanians. So a lot of that revolves around this idea of nexus and whether or not a business has an actual location in a place. We saw a big, national discussion around that with Wayfair, but this would be more specific. And this is something that they've tried in Maryland. That's the only state that has passed something like this. And it is seeing a lot of legal challenges. So even though it does sound like a way to generate a whole lot of revenue, it is also not something that is necessarily legal, or we'll find out from Maryland, basically. The other legislation is one that would require corporations to basically pay taxes in Pennsylvania if they're selling stuff in Pennsylvania, rather than file all of their taxes in another state like Delaware if they have like a PO box or something in Delaware. So right now, say someplace like Target, right? If Target is just filing their taxes like, oh, we have our main place in Delaware. I probably shouldn't say Target because I have no idea whether or not they pay taxes in Pennsylvania. So forgive me, Target. But it's just an example of a store that we have. So let's say they're based in Delaware, which is a tax-free state. If they are not filing taxes here, then they're not paying taxes here. So that's something that they want to basically change the way that filing happens so that that's not allowed.
I know that there's been some, I'm trying to remember who the guy was, but it's kind of a big story a while ago when Washington State started doing. They instituted some taxes that affected people who had more money, and it was like the head of Amazon, maybe, who then moved to Florida. I'm hoping I'm getting these things right, but have they talked any about that concern of how these sorts of things might discourage people from staying in Pennsylvania or businesses from doing business in Pennsylvania? I know California has also run into that problem too. We've seen a lot of like tech companies move out of California, move to Texas or to like South Carolina or some of these other places.
Certainly. Yeah, I think that's the fears, that it will drive away business if you make these less business friendly policies. I think at this point, it's just sort of a matter of figuring out what's untenable in terms of the impact it has on the state to be losing out on taxes versus the impact it would be to lose out on the potential revenue of operations. Obviously, Amazon, that's been in the news a lot in Pennsylvania because they have decided to invest $20 billion in data centers here. So we want to be friendly to Amazon because Amazon's bringing a lot of money here. The reps who spoke about this, they weren't offering up that argument, certainly, but it's definitely, one that floats around is, trying to make Pennsylvania a more business friendly state. It's certainly an issue of concern. But then you have someone like Rep. Krajewski who says, we tried this starting in the 80s. Like this isn't the way the government always was. This is specifically trickle down economics, and it hasn't been working for the states. We've seen schools and healthcare, education, stuff like that get underfunded progressively in that time. So, we do have people who harken back to another time where they say taxes used to be higher, especially for the wealthy, and we used to have great infrastructure. I think that might be a little bit of rose-colored glasses. I think I read a report from the Tax Foundation that said even though, the wealthiest 1% used to have a 91% marginal tax rate, they were actually paying about 40-something%. That's still well more than they pay now, but it's not 91%.
Well, it'll be interesting to see as this conversation continues in Pennsylvania what they land on. Thank you for your insights on this story. You can keep up with this story and more at centersquare.com.